Welcome back. All right, so news of the day video for all you fine people on the internet for your Tuesday, August the 27th. Getting closer to September, and then we get into training camp, and then season begins. So we'll start off talking about Nashville. They're at the top of the board. Barry Trotz, the GM of the Nashville Predators, saying the team had a plan for Askarov's development, that he brings in Mitch Korn as the goaltending coach for Nashville this season, in part to work with Askarov, and talks about how many hours they've put into the development of Askarov, but that is part of being a general manager. You'll spend those hours invested into the development of players. Some players develop and play on a different team. Some players go through that whole development process and never quite reach the National Hockey League. In the case of Askarov, he just saw that extension for Saros, and the reports were he didn't see a path where he became the starting goaltender in Nashville. And being that we're 4 years out from his draft year, it makes sense that he's looking at that and going, I don't see a path forward. And going to San Jose, even if he's going to spend this coming season, even if he spends it with the Barracuda for the most part, there is no impediment to him being the starting goaltender as soon as the following season, since Blackwood and Vanacek, I think, are both on expiring contracts this season. So it is not the same situation he's finding himself in at all, even if he does find himself in the minors. The funny thing is, San Jose's pretty good at developing goaltenders too, at least over their history. So we'll see how Askarov's development is affected by going to San Jose. I can't see where that would be a bad thing. So, but Nashville definitely sounds like, at least Barry Trotz, not all that happy to go through the process of developing a goaltender and then sending him off somewhere else. But he didn't give that goaltender much of a choice. He wants a chance to be a starter in the NHL. So Florida won the Stanley Cup, of course, this year. Spoiler alert and all that. Their center ice logo has been revealed, and it looks like teams are going to fill that whole face-off circle with the logo this season. And because we've seen that with Vancouver, Ottawa, just off the top of my head, and now with Florida too. But Florida's got kind of a nice little pattern with it too, where they've got the embossed Stanley Cup pattern around the outside of the logo. So it's in yellow, so it's like the sun's aura, but it also has the fact that it's in the, it looks very similar to the embossed cup pattern on the Stanley Cup, and they're the one team in the NHL that can do that. Then nobody's going to be like, hey, you can't do that. Yeah, they can. They won the Stanley Cup. So if they want to have like a hint of a Stanley Cup in their logo at center ice, they're the one team in the NHL that can do it. Toronto. So Nick Robertson, the latest on Nick Robertson is there's been no movement. He wanted a trade in June. The team came out publicly and said, you know, we've got room for Robertson on our team. And it does look like there's a spot potentially on the roster for Robertson should he settle this and sign a contract extension with Toronto. But maybe it's a situation where he's been told that before. Maybe he just doesn't think he's going to get a fair opportunity in Toronto. I'm mildly surprised too, because they have changed the coach. And I'm not saying Sheldon Keefe's the reason why Robertson wasn't getting games for Toronto. But maybe Berube would love Robertson's game, and maybe he'd play him a lot more, right? So for the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that could use a little bit of help on the wing, if Robertson comes around and if he and the Leafs can work out a deal, extension, then that could help the Toronto Maple Leafs a lot on that side. But it definitely sounds like he still wants out. And if you're Toronto, you'd be at least concerned that Robertson could go somewhere else and become a top six forward. So you're probably going to want a pretty good return. And if you're trading for Robertson, you can make the argument of he's not really proven yet at the NHL level. And so that could affect what you're willing to offer for him. So we'll see. Let me know your thoughts. How much do you think a team should give for Nick Robertson? And where do you think he ends up? I'd love to see him in Dallas with his brother. Just throwing that out there. Yanni Hakanpää. Speaking of Dallas, it sounds like the signing of Hakanpää is very, very unlikely. The reports now are that this comes back to the knee injury, which Dallas doctors diagnosed as basically being that he's not going to be able to play anymore, is how Dallas viewed it. So that's why he didn't return to Dallas. And it's bone on bone at the knee. And yeah, I don't know how you can fix that and maintain a hockey career. So it definitely sounds like Hakanpää highly unlikely to be signed by the Leafs. And probably unlikely to sign anywhere unless there's a team that's willing to overlook that medical report and the medical reporting that's been out there and just give him a shot at a roster spot. Maybe he ends up on a tryout. Maybe he ends up getting a professional tryout. Maybe even with Toronto. Maybe they could bring him in just on a tryout and say, all right, we'll see how that knee is. So getting back to another Dallas tie-in here, the Anaheim Ducks joined Dallas in broadcasting their local games free on Victory Plus. Victory Plus is an all-new streaming service, which, as I mentioned, Dallas is using for their games, and now Anaheim is using them as well. KCOP TV is also going to carry 65 of their games locally as well. So that's a Fox channel. And yeah, so if you want to watch games in Anaheim, there you go. And so pretty big announcement for the Ducks, I guess. As, again, the landscape when it comes to the regional broadcasting is definitely changing. And so new streaming service coming out makes a lot of sense. Hopefully they have a business model that works, which Bally's definitely has not. Bally sports networks have been losing teams right, left, and center, but of course they're in bankruptcy as well. Tampa Bay. So if you're looking for a job around a National Hockey League team, the Tampa Bay Lightning are hiring a social media director. So if you feel like you can do that, they do want somebody who's got a degree and has experience. So you can't just go, well, I like hockey. Can I have a job, please? They're going to want a little bit more than that. But it is kind of interesting to see how many social media people are used by each team. And I would imagine it's not a bad job. I'd imagine it's a pretty good gig. It does mention, too, that you have to be ready to be on the road a bunch. So traveling with the team. And so it does make it more difficult for people with young families. But, yeah, social media director job there for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I'll also throw out there, too, this is the time of year where if you've ever wanted to work in around a hockey team, this is where they're hiring for various jobs as we get set for the fall. Jordan Eberle talking about the new coach in Seattle, which is Dan Bylsma. He moves up from Coachella Valley. And Eberle's saying he likes Bylsma's passion, his energy for the game, and says that the Seattle Kraken players are excited to get back in training camp and have a chance to bounce back this year. Keep in mind that Seattle, it's very likely a lot of, and I know there were a lot of announcers last year that really were pretty much actively rooting for Seattle to turn it around and get into the playoffs. There were times late in the season where I'd hear an announcer, oh, I think Seattle's got a chance, and I'd say out loud to the TV, they don't. They just don't. The math doesn't work. They're not going to make it. But I think they're going to be a popular pick for a team that's going to bounce back and get into the playoffs. And if they do, then Dan Bylsma suddenly is in line for a Jack Adams Award as Coach of the Year. I think Bylsma's a good coach. I'm glad that he's earned his way back up. Coachella Valley had 2 very strong seasons since Seattle put their farm team there. And so I think Bylsma deserves a lot of credit. So does Ron Francis. And credit Ron Francis, too, that when he decided to switch out the coach, that the guy that he brings in is the AHL coach. And as I've said before, I think that's a good move, is to make sure that it's a move where you're bringing somebody up from within. And I think it makes for a more seamless transition. And ideally, it would be somebody who hasn't coached in the NHL before. In Bylsma's case, it's been a while since he coached at the National Hockey League level. So we'll see how things go in Seattle. What do you expect from Seattle? And hey, what do you think of any of the items on the board? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.